dialogue. Yes. Maloca is an indigenous longhouse used in the Amazon, yeah? And it is a common space open to all the people to stay there, to find consent through discussions, yeah? It is a meeting point, a social center, yeah? And there's a lot of time when you're in the Maloca. But we are in the Maloca virtual and we don't have so much time here. And so that's why we reduce our time to 2 hours, and we have quite a strict timetable, a schedule, and which I want to present you now right away, yeah, to have clear rules, house rules. We are asking everybody to turn off the microphones, yeah, and to leave the camera on, yeah, because everybody wants to see who is watching and talking, and so we feel a little bit more comfortable, yeah. We have the chat, which is open for any questions during all the time. You can put them into the chat. Kerstin is taking care of the chat, yeah. Today's schedule is as follows. We will start with 2 impulse speeches, one by Jean-Gabriel Raffaelli from ISA, and one by Edgar Honetschläger from Go Bugs Go. Following each of the speeches, you can put quick questions, and then we go into breakout sessions, yeah, to see what we can assume and take for us for the issue we are talking about today, yeah. And we will go into the breakout sessions around 4 o'clock for half an hour more or less, and then we will come back into the big forum and exchange our impressions in a big group, yeah. I think for all the people who is here, I don't have to present tell a lot about Climate Alliance. I thought it's important to remember that Austrian Climate Alliance is part of the International Climate Alliance, the biggest network of European municipalities in partnership with indigenous people. And it's over 30 years, yeah, that in more than 2,000 member cities in 27 European countries are working together in this international cooperation on climate action with a focus on local action and global responsibility. In Austria, it's now 30 years that we work together with the Foyen, which is the organization of the indigenous organizations of the Rio Negro. And our specialist for Foyen is here with us. It's Kerstin. She is working with Foyen and with ISA. Jean, who comes from ISA, will explain us a little bit more about ISA and why we have this cooperation. I will quickly present you our panel, yeah, starting with Jean, yeah, Jean-Gabriel Raffaelli. Jean is an ecologist. He's working for ISA, the Instituto Socioambiental in Brazil, who supports indigenous organizations, companies, organizations in different issues. There are a lot of biologists, ecologists, anthropologists, lawyers, journalists, yeah, doing a lot of informative work and support, and they are partner of the Climate Alliance. Edgar Honetschläger is an artist. He's a filmmaker. He is also an ecologic activist, and he lived already in different parts of the world, starting in Tokyo, New York, in Brasilia as well. And now he stays in Tarquina near Rome, and he founded in 2018 the NPO Go Bugs Go, who works on artistic utopias of creating human-free zones. But I'm not entering into the theme now. I'm just presenting the team and who is here today. Kerstin, I already said, Kerstin is from Klimabündnis as well. She's my colleague. We're working in climate justice, and Kerstin takes care of the cooperation with the Rio Negro. And my name is Silvia. I will be the moderation today. And I'm at Klimabündnis also responsible for climate justice and leading you through the Maloca Mundial today. And to get an idea, yeah, the theme today, our issue today is biodiversity seeks wildness. That's a bit provocative because Jean will talk about humans working on biodiversity, yeah, and Edgar will talk about the contrary. So we will enter in this issue, and the aim of today is to open new perspectives and ways of thinking in climate action, yeah, taking care of diversity. I think the main issue is the diversity, because we are entering in a phase, yeah, that is quite a big crisis, yeah. We are living a climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, political crisis, maybe just to remember it to everybody today. In the Brazilian Congress voted nearly the destruction of the indigenous people's rights, destruction of indigenous lands, and now it has to be approved by the Senate, yeah, and the Congress tries to destroy again the Ministry of Indigenous People and of Climate Action. So in Brazil, we have quite a big issue happening right now in the moment. In Austria, we have a chancellor who said, yeah, we have to make something because to save our climate, we can't care anymore so much about nature conservative, about nature conservation. So there are very strange points coming in, and we will think about these issues and see how we can join it, yeah, and where we can find the central points, yeah. You might ask yourself why the Climate Alliance always talks about indigenous people and works since 30 years together with indigenous people. And one of the easiest answers is that 80% of world's biodiversity is taken care by 5% of the world population, and those are the indigenous people. So indigenous people takes care of the world climate for us, yeah, also. And our work also is to help and to protect indigenous people in their style of living. And what we want to do today is also learning about the different views on nature conservation, biodiversity protection, and climate action. See climate action also in connection with the green colonialism, with this growth mentality that we live here so strongly, and the primacy of the economy, and to see how the indigenous way of living is different in this, yeah, and what we can learn from that, yeah. And climate justice means leaving no one behind, yeah. That's the Agenda 2030. Those are the 17 SDGs, yeah. And we find them when we start looking at the projects that Joan will present us, and also Edgar will present us, yeah. And today we should reflect a little bit about our relationship to nature, about the relation between natures and humans, and the power relations between nature and humans, yeah. How do we see nature? How do we treat nature? And what can we change easily, yeah, locally and also globally? And so I would like to pass right away the screen and the micro to João, yeah, who will show us how the indigenous way of life and the traditional agricultural system of Rio Negro, yeah, are guaranteeing and featuring biodiversity and also guaranteeing nutrition sovereignty, yeah, and how this is implemented in the Rio Negro. And I would ask you, dear Jean, to start your presentation.
All right, thank you, Silvia. So, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be here today. My name is João Gabriel, as Silvia said. I'm an ecologist, specialized in tropical agriculture and tropical forest management. I'm working at ISA, Instituto Socioambiental, Socio-Environmental Institute from Brazil, that works in different parts of Brazil with traditional communities and working with different areas as forest management, protection of the territory, indigenous laws, and other projects. So I'm going to start my presentation. Let's see. Let me know if you can see. Yeah? All right. So today I'm here to present the Rio Negro traditional agricultural system, a cultural heritage from Brazil, recognized as Brazilian cultural heritage, and how it promotes social environmental services. So just to show you a little bit the region, for you to know what I'm talking about. So here is, can you see the pointing of the mouse? Yeah. So here is the northwest part of Brazil in the Amazonas province, Amazonas state. We've bordered with Colombia and Venezuela. So it's called the dog's head because it's the shape of a dog head here. So it's how we call this region. That is part like São Gabriel da Cachoeira, where I am now. Also Santa Isabel do Rio Negro and Barcelos is part of the Rio Negro basin. That the Rio Negro comes all the way up from here, going to by these three municipalities and going to Manaus, where it meets the Solimões River and make the Amazonas River. So this region is composed by 9 indigenous land recognized by the government as indigenous land, representing more than 13 million hectares, with 23 indigenous ethnic groups, 4 linguistic branches, and a mosaic landscape mosaic composed by like dense Amazon forests, wetlands, like savanna areas, and different rivers, not just the main Black River, but also river that goes all the way into the territory where the communities are distributed. So these all generate a social environmental diversity. So talking about the Rio Negro traditional agricultural system, that is a set of interdependent knowledge and practices for managing the agricultural lands, and also technologies for processing and storing the food that characterize the Rio Negro food system, that guarantee food security for the indigenous people, and also maintenance of the forest standing. So the idea of recognizing as a cultural heritage from Brazil is not like just as a simple agricultural method, but like a system that is composed by all the techniques, the species utilized, also the mythology behind, also the food and all the different recipes. So it's like a complex of not just the practice, but also the culture behind. So also the use of equipments that they use, such as basketry, glitter, ceramics, that the manufacturer is specialized in certain ethnical groups. So some ethnical groups do like ceramics, others do basketry, others do, I don't know, cassava flowers, so they also exchange between them, and this makes like this social network of exchanges that goes from the Amazonas, from Manaus to Nitu in the Colombian Amazon. So the recognition of the Brazilian as a Brazilian cultural heritage happened in 2010 with a partnership with the local association from the middle Rio Negro, where I work. I especially work there. Also, Institute Socioambiental and a project called Pacta, Populations, Agrobiodiversity and Traditional Knowledge in the Amazon. So just to show you more or less, as I was saying, that the idea of system, like agricultural system, traditional agricultural system, involve these different things that I was saying, like cultivated plants, for example, the spaces, the uses and the functions, and the knowledge. So this all compose this traditional agricultural system. That is like a dynamic production system where cultural, ecological, historical, and socioeconomic elements interact in space and time, configure different arrangements of production techniques, and show resilience and sustainability, generating characteristic landscapes, as I said before. So just to show a bit of the time table. So the beginning of the mobilization and the studies happened in 1990. So they start to articulate between the organizations and the local association. Then the beginning of the studies happened in 2005. Then the recognition happened in 2010. 10 years after, there is the revalidation of the traditional system that happened in 2021. That was revalidated, and then the safeguard plan, that is like a plan for safeguarding this heritage for the future. So the agricultural part of this traditional system, as I said before, it happens from Barcelos to São Gabriel in all the region of the Rio Negro Basin. 23 indigenous ethnic groups. These 4 linguistic branches: Aruac, Tucano, Nadehu, Itupi, and all in these agricultural plots. In the studies, they recognize more than 300 species and cultivated varieties. And they say that, as a translation from Portuguese, like Maniva society, Maniva is the cassava plant, the Manihot suculenta. That is this root that is well consumed in the whole Amazon, and is the base of the food that indigenous people and all people in the north of Brazil consume, and is like a sort of big source of carbohydrates. And there are a lot of different varieties of maniva, of cassava. Then in the studies, they could find like more than 30 varieties per agricultural plot, per farm. This is activity done mainly by women. And this exchange network that strengthened the kinship relationship, and also agroforestry genetic collections. So using a lot of sources from the forest as well, planting together with the maniva. So the maniva, the cassava is the main crop, but also they have like different crops planted together. So just a few photos for you to see like about the extractivist part of this agricultural system. So like people going to the forest to collect the wara nut. So this is like a nut that is specific in this region. So how they go, they collect, they do all the manufacture of the nut for them letting people to eat. Here's a photo of like a traditional fishing method using traps. So there are different type of traps for different type of fishes and for different type of rivers. here also, like they were doing a management plan for the extraction of this tree for making the bench, the Tucano bench. I will show you a photo later. It's like a bench where people sit, and it's like a traditional from the Tucano culture. And this photo is they extracting the leaves of caranã that they use a lot for building the roofs in the communities. So they say, like, as social technologies, for example, so all the ceramics, the basketry that they use, all for processing the food that come from the traditional system. So like basketries, also like the seed for seeding this bijou that is made by the cassava flour, and also the ceramics for cooking like the traditional food here, as an example, like a soup, fish soup, with a lot of pepper that people usually is like very common in the region. So just a figure photo to show you the management that they do in those landscapes. So here is the Sleep Beauty or Curicuriari mountain. That is the shape of the Sleep Beauty from the fairy tale. That also in this traditional agricultural system, there are a lot of mythology behind. So there is, for example, one mythological being, that is the warrior, that is responsible for creating the agriculture among the indigenous people in the region. And the beliefs also are connected in how they manage the landscape. For example, how they manage the fishing. There are a lot of different mythology of like the beings that take care of the fish, so they cannot like overfish, otherwise this mythological being will be upset and they're not going to be fish for them anymore to fish. So how they manage is also really connected with the mythology. Just a few photos for you to show. So here is a Maloca, if you could see in the top right, that also they use from this extractivism and agricultural methods for in their culture. So also this Tucano bench where this man is seated is the bench that I told you. So also involved with the agricultural system, the body painting, the culture, the dance, traditional dances and music, this kind of beer that they produce from cassava, also the benzimentos, that is like, it's called the blessings, where like the old members that do the blessing for the people and for the land and for having like a good agriculture. Talking about social environmental services, there is a law in Brazil about payment for environmental services. But as we are trying to work, not just environmental services, but contribution for social environmental services. So services that the nature provides to us as an ecosystem service, but also the people that make this happen. So having in consideration the lifestyle, the knowledge, the culture, and the management of the landscape the indigenous people do, and how they contribute for the ecosystem services, the provision. Just to show you a bit of the diversity promotion, here's a study that they did of the network of exchanging seeds and as like a genetic dispersion. So between different ethnic groups. So, for example, they found 2 species of the capsicum genus, the genus of the pepper, but then 78 varieties of peppers in these 2 genus. So, as the pepper, they can cross-pollinate really easy and have like a new variety, and all this network of exchange that is part also of the traditional agricultural system and that promotes agrobiodiversity. And you could see like the lines that are stronger, like the thicker lines are like how can I say, strong connections or have more connection between ethnic groups that are more related. Another point that I want to talk to you about how they do the agriculture here. So it's well known as slash and burn agriculture. So we have, for example, usually people do like less than 1 hectare per the region. So this photo shows like this dot in the middle of like the forest. And what they do, they cut a piece of the forest, selecting the species that they want to leave and cutting others. They let them to dry, and then they burn it. And so all the nutrients that were in the biomass, when you burn, it goes into the soil. The soils in the Amazon are very poor in terms of nutrients and are very acidic. So this is a way for them to manage to be able to have agricultural yield. So when you burn the biomass, you enrich the soil with nutrients, but also the ashes, they control the acidity. So we have like less acidic soils with the ashes from the from burning, so we can cultivate there. But then it's like agriculture that you do in this land. I think I ran out of time. This agricultural plot, they can cultivate for 3 years maximum. Then the land's not so productive, so then move for another. They move for another area. So this actually is interesting because you could see when they don't burn everything. So just like the leaves that got dry, but like the main trunks and branches of the trees, they stay on the ground. And when they decompose, they enrich the soil with carbon in the future. So when they leave the area, it kind of recomposes as a forest again really quickly. Like here in the Amazon, like the composition rate and the recomposition of the forest is really fast. So with this, you make kind of you change the landscape in a way that there is a ecological theory called intermediary disturb. So these kind of mimic the fall of a tree, open a gap in the forest. So when you have a medium disturbance in the forest, you have like, you increase the diversity. So when you have a low disturb, you have less diversity. When you have mid disturb, you have more diversity. And when you don't have disturb, you also keep the forest in this standing climax condition. Sorry, Silvia, I think I ran out of time. Should I keep going just to?
I think the time is running, yeah. And maybe if you make a short resume of the next slide so that we can go over to questions and to Edgar, okay? Thank you.
Perfect. So, also like having people into the lands, they kind of patrol the territory. So they go around for collecting things for the use. So then they can go around all the territory and see what's happening from if people are invading, if there's like illegal mining, illegal deforestation. And just to show you, I will just finish with like this slides. So all this, the agricultural system is kind of where we develop the indigenous also economy here in the region. So all these agricultural products and also the manufactured tools, as I told you, that is part of the agricultural system as well. Now it's a project that we work, like a line of project that we work that is called like the value chain project of like promoting the indigenous economy. So different sources of products and also help them to keep what they have been doing, but also have like economical recognition for that. So thank you very much. Sorry for the running. This time was super short. So I would like to thank you all the partners, and just this final message for them to let's keep resisting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, João.
Thank you.
Very good overview. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Auch auf Deutsch ou em português? Assim, se tem perguntas abertas, wenn es offene Fragen gibt, können wir auf Deutsch oder auf Portugiesisch fragen. Oder wir gehen zum Edgar weiter.
Edgar, I think your microphone is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I have a question because, ages ago I was living in Brazil, in Brasilia and in Sao Paulo. And, I learned, of course, about tupi or not tupi. That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And so I was now quite surprised. How many of these indigenous people exist up there? Do you have numbers?
Yeah, actually, we had like the census that happened last year in Brazil. That happens every 10 years. The census that cover the whole Brazil. The results are not done yet, but the last in the region, the municipality of São Gabriel, there is like this whole region that is where I am now, like in the city, let's say, but also the whole territory. It's 45,000 people. So we say like here in the city is like 20,000 people, but in the land, like in the whole territory, like 30 people in the 25,000 people in the territories, in the communities.
And they live absolutely the traditional way that maybe back then Claude Lévi-Strauss described. Or is it adapted to the 21st century and our so-called civilization?
Yeah, pretty much actually. As far as you go from the city here, as people live in modern tradition, because the contact with the city and like the modern world, let's say, is less. So people live more in their own habits. But of course, it's not as 2,000 years ago. They have like a lot of influence from the modern world, especially like, for example, having like boats with engine, and also like some products that they buy from the city, like soap and salt and other things, but also other things are going to the territory. So of course we still have influence, but still a lot of people, especially like the further communities, living like pretty much the traditional way.
Thank you.
Jesus has a question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Should I make it in English? Right. Not a question, a comment, just to say thank you. Excellent presentation. It is very interesting to see how these indigenous communities know very well how to manage their natural resources in a sustainable way. I work here in Austria for the Ministry of Climate Action. We have a very good understanding of the role of local communities and indigenous communities promoting sustainability. That is why in our project, we have a focus on strengthening these groups, and we are actually also supporting local communities in Rio Negro. So the problem is that in the very same countries, there are other groups with other perspectives. And we know well that these are the agribusiness group supported by governments. This is the case in Brazil, and also this is the case in many other countries. We should not forget that we here in the countries of the global north, we contribute to this problem and situation through our demand, because agribusiness exists because we from here demand the products produced in the frame of agribusiness. Just to say that it is very important to strengthen local communities, indigenous communities, in order to promote sustainability and trying to stop deforestation. So thank you for the presentation, and please continue doing such an excellent work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we go further and we continue with Edgar, yeah, to present local action in Europe, in Austria also, yeah, that Edgar will show us another way to protect our biodiversity, which is different of this way, yeah. And so maybe Edgar, I can ask you to start.
Yes, before we show anything, actually it will be Silvia who shares the screen, because for some reason my software doesn't work. Before we go into this, I would just want to tell you the following, because I was living in Tokyo, Japan from, one can say, 1992 to 2011, when the nuclear power plant in Fukushima blew up. And this was an amazing shock, because it's so close to Tokyo. My spouse would say, you know, we got to protect the child from the radiation. And so we left Japan and moved back to Europe. We moved back to Vienna, my hometown. And from there I moved to Italy. And I guess also out of fear, I started a garden, a vegetable garden, here where I am now in Tarquinia, which is 1 hour north of Rome. A very poor area with farmers. And while I was working on this garden that increased in size every year, I come to realize that the insects were just getting less and less and less. So long before the media started to focus on it, my neighbor farmers and me realized that, that there's a real problem, because we need the insects for pollination. No insects, then even our cultivated plants will be in major trouble, and therefore us will be in trouble. So I was thinking to myself, as an artist in my artistic practice, is there anything I can do about this? Because how can I carry on dealing with aesthetics and creating aesthetics in terms of painting, in terms of sculpture, in terms of whatever, while the world is just falling apart? And so I thought to myself at some point, because, Silvia mentioned in the beginning, the politicians in Brazil, in Austria, wherever, well, I have very little hope that these people will actually ever get to do anything, really. I think it's very much a question of individuals. And here now, we seem to have a whole bunch of individuals who are really willing to do something and put their time and their lives into this. And what I'm basically demanding is that democracy, we're so proud of ourselves, and we live in democratic countries. We know that democracy is in danger and so on, but I think democratic principles have to be true for anything that exists in this world, not only just for human beings. So it's very, very important to say even a cricket should be respected, right? So we always claim freedom for ourselves, but how much freedom do we give nature? Nothing. You can say humans, because they're so mighty proud of themselves, have agreed to protect the culture we bring about. But we have not agreed until today to protect nature. Now, if you go into art history and you take the 20th century, you will find a very remarkable man, Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp was one of the founders of modernism, and he developed the so-called objet trouvé, or the ready-made. Some of you might have heard about it. Now, an artist declares whatever, this glass, for example, to be a piece of art. Well, if I declare this to be a piece of art, then it deserves our protection. If I declare a piece of land to be art, then I resolve, in a way, the dichotomy between art and nature. Because as I said before, culture, because man-made, we protect. Nature, we don't. But if I, as an artist, declare nature, a piece of nature, to be art, then it turns into culture and therefore should be protected. Now, this is, of course, a mind game that most people will not accept because it's a very artistic way of thinking. But at some point, I realized that I need to do the following. If you think of, I've always been wondering how all these billionaires out there in the world, why don't they just spend their money on protecting nature? Why do they buy more houses and more Mercedes and more whatever? I mean, this is ridiculous. I don't get it. Why don't they buy? But there's an obstacle, because there was this man, this Californian family, actually, the Thompsons, who in the 80s sold all their companies and they bought huge chunks of land in Patagonia and started rewildering those chunks of land. Unfortunately, even in so-called democratic countries, parliament can sit together and decide to expropriate a person. This can happen in any democracy. You own a piece of land, the community, the state decides to build a highway. They take it, if you're not willing to sell, they take it away from you and give you a substitute for it. So if you are a single person, then you can always be expropriated. But if a lot of people together buy a piece of land, then will become a political factor, not a political party, because the politicians want our votes. So now maybe it's the time, Silvia, to please help me and go on the GoBucksGo website. And because I drew a little 90-second film, 1.5 minutes, you just scroll down. Yes. Oh, no. You have to go, sorry, you have to go to the very beginning of the website again, where it all starts out. No. I wanted to show you this movie because the movie explains everything. Can you restart GoBucksGo.org? Perfect. And now scroll down, please. Here, this is the movie. And let's watch this movie because I think it explains everything quite well.
Silvia, you first have to share your audio. You
Exactly.
gotta.
Yeah.
No rain.
Once again.
Farmers use
Do you hear me now?
pesticides to
Do you
protect their
hear it?
crops.
I started again.
You started again.
Yeah. Sorry.
People
Wait.
cut their lawns, makes the
Wait,
bugs
wait,
die.
wait.
No bugs, no birds.
Okay.
Okay, now we try it again. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Where did our bugs go? Ever longer periods of no rain. Farmers use pesticides to protect their crops. People cut their lawns, makes the bugs die. No bugs, no birds. In the last 20 years, the world lost 80% of its insects and 40% of its birds. Who pollinates the blooming fields? Insects do. No insect, no food. Trees have to make way for cows. No rhinos, no lions, no butterflies, no wildlife. Creatures from the past like dinosaurs. Only humans. Do you want your child to know the song of a bird only from its cell phone? I worry. Many do. Millions do. What if we buy land together and give it back to nature? We don't build, destroy, interfere, touch. We let nature do what it wants. We create a non-human zone. We own land together. not the state, not a corporation, not an individual. If an individual owns, it's easy for the government to disown for the state's purposes, to build a highway, to exploit the resources. If thousands of us own a small patch of land together, no politician can take it away from us, because we are voters, us, the bugs. Let's give the bugs a chance. Let's give ourselves a chance. Become a buggy. Go, bugs, go.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Silvia. So
welcome.
you might want to scroll up again.
Okay, sorry.
So what we do is, you know, I go into art institutions in Europe, let's say museums, galleries, and I do a presentation there. Here in Italy, I have my huge garden. I create incentives because people don't want to give anything if they don't get anything else in exchange. So what I do is, like, every summer, I grow tons of tomatoes, and then I turn them into sugo, Italian sugo, and it comes along with a drawing, and that I did personally, and it comes along with a leporello. And so it and you can see it under presentations. Can you click presentations, please? Thank you. Okay, now scroll, please, down. See, these are different presentations in different locations. It's always adapted to the place and to the institution. Further down, please. Yeah, this was the Museum of Modern Art in Salzburg. I love it when kids join us. Okay, that's it. Well, in any case, that's what we do, and we try to win so-called buggies. We don't call them members; we call them buggies. And what we do with the money is we buy land and declare it non-human zone. So I mean, what Joao has been explaining is a totally different story. This is about indigenous people who've been with this land for generations and generations. But over here in Europe, you know, I mean, it's very important from my point of view that the few forests, ancient forests we have, there's just a few left, are supported by other zones where wilderness can grow. And those are our zones, among others. We're not the only ones who are doing this, but to declare something a non-human zone is a very utopian act because it doesn't exist in European law. So whenever we are about to buy another piece, because we got enough money again to buy another piece, we need lawyers, we need notaries, we need all kinds of people who are into law in order to find loopholes within the law to buy a piece of land and declare it a non-human zone, because everything is dedicated to something. Some land is dedicated to agriculture, other parts are dedicated to foresting, the next is dedicated to building, whatever, but this whole concept of non-human zone does not exist. Now, this is also very interesting how the generations have changed in terms of perceiving this idea, because for example, at the University of the Boku, I don't know how you call it in English, the University of Agriculture and Soil in Austria, that's been existing for 150 years. There's also at the Museum of Natural History in Vienna, the older generation has a different take on nature than the younger generation. And I'm talking about scientists. So there seems to be, with the older generation, this idea that nature needs man's help in order to exist. So their argument is, the more humans support nature, the the more variety we will have and we can keep. So they are worried about neophytes, neophytes, that's plants that come from China, I don't know, from anywhere, through international trade and so on, and they are very worried about those plants taking over and extinguishing and erasing the plants we've already had here in Europe. And the young generation doesn't think so, because they will think in longer terms, 100 years, 300, 500 years, and they will go, well, I mean, like here in Italy, there's so many trees that are considered having been here forever, but it's not true. If you look into the history of biology, in the history of the landscapes, you don't have to go far back to see that the vegetation was very, very different. So that's what we're aiming at. Basically, we're aiming at creating awareness for nature that was here long before us human beings, and perfectly developed by itself and didn't need human interference at all. And we are, of course, I mean, one cannot say that, it's not easy to buy land here in Europe. Post-COVID, land got more and more expensive and so on. So it's not like we are buying more. You might want to see, Silvia, you please help me. You could click on the website, the pieces of land we've bought so far against the the farmers around us are not very happy, because they call what we do just a mess, because they of course want to be taking care of everything, and they don't want land that and vegetation that grows the way it would like to grow. What is this?
Silvia, we are just seeing your Adresszelle.
Echt sehr interessant. Weil, warte mal, ich mach's nochmal. Sorry, technique is always a hassle.
Yes, here. See, here are some of those non-human zones we've set up. One is here, it's in Lower Austria, the one on the top. The next one is in Burgenland, which is kind of east and south of Austria. We bought more than 5 hectares there. And go further down, please. Now, this is right next to a big lake, Neusiedler See, where we bought a zone. You can see how stuff is growing widely right next to where wine is being grown. And further down, this was quite a success, because this is in Italy, in Naples. Capo di Monte is, there's a museum. It's a hill, and with a beautiful castle that the Spaniards, when they owned Naples, were in charge of. They set it up, and they have a huge garden. There are 120 hectares of land that is used by the citizens for recreation. And in the midst of this, after negotiating with the Italian government for 2.5 years, we succeeded to set up a non-human zone. So in the midst of a Baroque garden, because basically it's a Baroque garden, so very well tended by humans, we set up a non-human zone, and there's these signs up, and with a QR code, and when kids play there or people walk by, they scan the QR code, and then they get all the information what Go Bugs Go is about. And why would we do that? We would do that because many Italian cultural institutions own land, own parks, and we would like to set up, of course, non-human zones in most of these parks. Now, there's a big difference between setting up a non-human zone within a well-tended Baroque garden and buying a piece of land in the middle of nowhere. at the Capo di Monte and at other Italian institutions, you know, and hopefully the Austrians and the Germans will join at some point, is more of a symbolic act, of course, because you will always have humans run into these zones. We're not setting up any walls. We're not Mr. Trump who wants to set up walls, right? So, but out in nature, you know, if we buy 5 hectares, like 3 weeks ago, we bought 3.2 hectares. And those pieces of land in the countryside, they really do something for the ecosystem. Yeah, I think that's it. Should I say anything more, Silvia?
For me, it's perfect if you stop now and we enter in a short discussion. And maybe as we are not so many people, maybe we don't do any breakout rooms, but we stay together. I think that would be the best way, because we are just 10 persons here. Or we can make breakout sessions. That's how people prefers, yeah?
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm stopping the sharing. Thank you very much, Edgar. Yeah, I think what was very interesting is that we were talking in both cases of collective land, of collective visions of land, yeah, of that collective land is a solution, yeah, for our climate and for our nature, yeah. But we see also that politics are one of the biggest problems in both cases, yeah, because as well here as in Brazil, yeah, collective indigenous land is suffering now all the things that you said, Edgar, yeah. This there is a new Congress, and the Congress puts in question all existing rights. So we always have this big confrontation with the laws and with the interest of who has more rights, nature or people. Yeah, I think that's one of the fundamental questions. And
because private property stinks, you know, that's like the Tupi. It's like Shoah, you know, it's focusing on these people. They just use the land and survive, and they do the best they can for nature, you know, and because they don't own. Private property is no good.
So let's our colleagues have some questions maybe, or some comments. That would be good. I would suggest, yeah, that our collective wish probably is to do something for our environment, for nature, to protect biodiversity, and to interfere in climate change in a positive way, yeah? And so we got 2 examples now, yeah, of how people is doing that, yeah? And so maybe you could come with your questions, or we can think together of how we can interfere in our communities, in our businesses, in our networks, yeah, because networking is one of a very important issue as well, yeah. As João told us, biodiversity in the Amazon is created through a network of seeds, yeah, because people, social interaction, people is changing their seeds, and so they are creating biodiversity, yeah. So yeah, I would like to open the discussion here. And we can do it in German, in Portuguese, in English, and work. Yes, Jesus, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you again for the presentation. I am curious about the criteria used by your NGO to select these non-human zones. If they are found just by chance, or is a kind of criteria are applied to select them? That is the question. And just a comment. We must take into account that here in Europe, we also have cultural landscapes that, if are well managed, they are very valuable for biodiversity. If we create a non-human zone, if we stop the management, this will probably have a negative impact on these cultural landscapes. For example, I think in landscape here in Austria with hedgerows, with trees, meadows, etc. They are very valuable for biodiversity. If we stop the management there, vegetation will overdevelop, and this will be negative for biodiversity. And the second comment is thinking of Italy, a Mediterranean country, stopping the management in the landscape. This promotes the overdevelopment of vegetation, the accumulation of biomass, and this can lead to huge fires. And that means that also a sustainable management of the landscape is a good option for Mediterranean ecosystem. Just to take this into account, a part of these comments, the question could be the criteria applied to select this non-human zone. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Well, I always hear management, and I don't know why people are so driven about managing everything. This comes back to the very question, you know. I mean, does it really need the humans to take care of nature? Do you really believe that it needs us in order to keep the biodiversity going? As I told you, the young generation in Austria of biologists at Go, we have about 1,500 members by now after 5 years. And there's a lot of biologists, ecologists, entomologists. And the young ones would now absolutely disagree with what you were saying. But about the categories, sure, we've made a portfolio of land that is desirable for us. It can be something that has been contaminated before, but the biologists among us worked out what is good in terms of the insects. So, you know, if you think here of Italy, it's very curious because in this part of Italy, Lazio, that surrounds Rome, there's agriculture everywhere, and there are roads. There's always this little strip between the road and the agriculture. And according to the biologists I'm dealing with here, sometimes this little strip has a bigger biodiversity than anything else around. But we do know that it's a bit as in the Amazon, you know, when they started out, you know, they cut down huge parts and then they leave a little island here, they leave a little island there. And, you know, this is not working for mammals. It's not working for most animals. And it's also not working for insects. Insects need space in order to reproduce. Now, then there's also people who will say, okay, you buy a piece of land. It's a meadow in the beginning with fantastic biodiversity. And then all of a sudden, all of a sudden, you know, not all of a sudden, after 10 years, you have woods, after 20 years, you have a forest, all right? So, but there's a lot of things who need the forest. We bought this piece of land in the south of Austria, in Burgenland. Everything around it is agriculture. We have 5 hectares with some water. The insects need water. The insects need dead wood in order to find a home, in order to reproduce. So one cannot just say a meadow, keeping it managed, you know, so it stays a meadow. So it has one fantastic variety of flowers, that this alone will guarantee the biodiversity that we want. And you don't have to worry because, you know, if it was up to me, I'd have millions of members already, and we would buy land on a daily basis. This is unfortunately or fortunately not going to happen. It's tiny little islands here and there. And if you think especially of Austria, Austria is more or less, or has become the world champion in sealing land, in concrete, faster than anywhere else. Soon, only the Alps will be sticking out because they can't build on the mountains. And I think at some point, there will be a generation who will be extraordinarily happy to find our little islands of land where they can at least study what nature does if man does not get involved.
I would like to ask, thank you, Edgar. I would like to ask Jean, how do you see that? Because you come from another place, no? And it would be interesting to hear your opinion about that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Edgar. Really great work you're doing there. Actually, there are like different things that I would like to say. That, for example, one thing is like an area that has been degraded. So, for example, for restoring the lands that has been degraded, a great example, like this big project in Africa of creating this green belt of planting like millions of trees. The success rate was like super low because people were trying to plant, like not considering the natural succession of the forest there. They were just planting trees, like climate species trees on the land, but then they were not working. And then they figured out that the places where the forest recovery was where there was no human action. So the forest by itself, like the nature went back by not having anyone like interfering in the land. So that's something that they discovered. If you talk about biodiversity, like what is biodiversity that everybody say? Like in ecology, the term biodiversity means the species richness and species abundance. So the amount, the different species that have, and the amount of individuals of each species. This is biodiversity or biological diversity. In a forest, there is like a climate forest, as for example in the Amazon, like that we have like areas with, let's say, pristine forests. If you have like those lands, like this management, you create habitats for different species. And having habitat for different species, you have like in the natural society, from a degraded land to a climate forest, you have like different habitats that you can have different species, like from perennials to like big old, super old trees. So in this case, the management is interesting to really create this biodiversity. But one thing that I just want to say as an example from Brazil, that is, actually I have, can I share slides of my presentation? Is it possible?
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't have time to show. That we have like this. So this is, can you see the mouse pointing here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for example, here is the Amazon region, it's composed by all those states in Brazil. And here in orange, we have, is known as the deforestation arc. So we have the deforestation arc going from south to north and from east to west. So we have an arc that people are going to the forest, the Amazon. Here where we are is like maybe one of the most conserved fragment of continuous forests in the Amazon. And this is thank you by the indigenous land. That is like a reserve but a reserve where indigenous can use it. And those studies show like that in the Rio Negro region, all the region, considering the also the non-indigenous land, we have less than 5% of deforestation in 2020-2021. And inside the indigenous land, less than 0.06% of deforestation. That is probably considering just these agricultural plots, like this small plots inside of the forest. There is nothing that recovers really, really easy. But just one thing that we really need to consider is that, yeah, we have people living in those regions since Brazil was Brazil, or not even recognized as Brazil. And they have been doing this, and until nowadays that they have been doing the same, and they are still there, and the forest still standing. So this shows us that the importance of having people there to manage and help to keep this. Another example, just to show quickly, here in this region in Pará, we have I think it's exactly this plot is like an indigenous land, and it's surrounded by like deforestation art. So is the indigenous land that keep the forest standing because they keep it, they have to keep it, but also they patrol the area. So they know when people are entering, like doing illegal mining, illegal deforestation, and they have to keep them. But still nowadays, we have an indigenous land recognized by the government, but still people are entering their lands, that's their lands. They are entering and they are doing deforestation, they are killing people. So it's a bit crazy here. Brazil is like a completely different reality, especially in the Amazon is a completely different reality from like the south of Brazil, you know. So it's not like nowadays that you have like indigenous land that you are kind of that nothing is going to happen. Like the pressure is going over and over each year in this art towards the Amazon region.
I have a question. You know, I was told, I was living in Brazil around the year 2008, yes. And I was told by biologists there that the Cerrado actually had a higher biodiversity than the Amazon. But by now, the Cerrado doesn't exist anymore because Brazil became the #1 supporter of food around the globe, or more than the United States. So the Cerrado has turned into agriculture thoroughly, almost thoroughly. Yeah. I mean, what a drama. I mean, it's unbelievable because we're talking about huge chunks of land, no?
Yeah.
So this is, it's so, yeah.
For example, there is a data that study that shows that in Brazil, we have an area that is the same size of Germany planted in soil. Like in GMO soya planted in Brazil, the size of a Germany.
Wow.
So this is crazy. Like we have one Germany in Brazil planted just by soya.
Yeah, I think
so.
It's very interesting now because we have different concepts of humanity. Now, humans who take care, like the indigenous or the older generations, of the landscape, and then the agro-business. But Kerstin is over here, since I think 5 minutes waiting to say something. Sorry, Kerstin, please come in.
That's okay. Thank you, Silvia. I was actually heading in the same direction as you were, and my question is more semantically driven, Edgar. I was wondering, I guess you've thought a lot about this because you're an artist, and I guess you choose your words very well, but why you decided to call those zones human-free zones? Because from what I understood, it's not probably... it's not only about keeping humans out, but rather keeping construction out, keeping pesticides out, and all of that stuff. And I think that probably one of the major problems that we are facing also is that in our Western world, we consider ourselves humans as the invaders, and probably we would need a different, or create a different picture of what humanity or being human means, because we can also have a different interaction with nature and not be the intruders, as we just saw from this example from the Amazon. And so it's probably more capitalism or new extractivism or other systemic problems that created those threats to nature, and not necessarily humanity in itself. So I was wondering why you decided to call those zones human-free zones and not, for example, or non-human zones, and not, for example, construction-free zones or pesticide-free zones. Why you decided to, use this word?
Yeah, because as I said before, best case scenario, humans leave nature around to use it as a recreation area. But what about recreation for nature? Why don't we give the nature the chance to be without us? Why do we always have to get involved in it?
Because we are a part of nature. We are nature.
Yes, we are, exactly. I agree. We are animals. Now, isn't it curious that humans seem to to be able to deal with animals only if they humanize them. You know, I mean, look on Facebook, you know, people get a kick out of a dog turning in circles and doing something very human. We cannot, for some reason, accept that they are different. We don't speak their language. They don't speak our language. Why can't we just let them be the way they are? Why can't we accept them the way they are? That's a major question. I very much agree with you. We are animals, but we consider ourselves, and this goes long before Christianity, we consider ourselves the crown of creation. And the arts in the West are more or less the most beautiful marble on top of the crown. That's ridiculous. I was brought up by a mother who would say that she would always take me to the forest every weekend. And we walked through the forest, and she would always say, walk carefully. First of all, don't shout. Don't make too much noise because you're disturbing all the other existences. And number two, any tiny little worm has the same right to be and exist in this world as you as a human being. So that's how I was brought up. And I just respect any other existence. That's why I'm demanding that democratic principles are not only used for humans, but for all existences in this world. And this is actually slowly happening. Think of certain laws that have been finally ratified in New Zealand and other parts. You know, if a river becomes a legal entity, if a chunk of land becomes a legal entity, of course humans have to speak for it, then it's much harder to destroy it. You know what I mean? We have to give a legal, I don't know how to put it, I wouldn't know in any language, but as soon as you give, let's say, a monkey a legal status within the human system, it's much harder to get rid of the monkey. And this is true for landscapes. This is true for rivers. This is true for everything. And there's a whole bunch of people out there, especially in the UK, who have been working on this. I just made a movie. Silvia saw it in the last 3 years. And it's called Le formiche di Mida, which is Midas ants. And in this movie, I'm trying to find the crystallization points in human history where we changed our concepts of nature. So 16,000 years ago, we started agriculture. Before, we were nomads. We were just walking around. Agriculture drove religion. It drove cities. No agriculture, no cities. No agriculture, no culture. None of all of these. So this is a crucial point in human history, is agriculture. But you can then make a big leap, and then you end up in the antique Greek times, where philosophers from Aristotle all the way to the Epicureans, were starting to, to get away from the so-called divine and give the power over the world and over nature also into the hands of humans. Because the Epicureans were talking about atoms. They were the first ones who figured out that atoms exist. They couldn't prove it because science didn't exist the way we know it back then. Then you can make another big leap. You go into the Renaissance. We all love the Renaissance in Europe, but the Renaissance made an amazing mess in terms of how we deal with nature. So, there's all these steps throughout humanity, also colonialism. Here's a lot of Brazilian people. I mean, there's a base to all of this, of this destruction. And it doesn't seem as if we want to understand where it comes from and where it's taking us, because it's definitely taking us to to where we are now. The mess is worse than ever.
But I think what is very interesting, yeah, in this whole discussion is that here, from our point of view, from European-minded, patriarchal, economically powerful, imperialistic country, yeah, from this point of view, we have the issue you present, Edgar, yeah, saying, okay, please humans stop, yeah, because you are destroying everything. But if we look at it from the indigenous point of view, we already have this system that you say that the monkey is on the same level as the human and the nature has the same rights, yeah? And there are very interesting concepts already in Colombia. Maybe Kerstin can talk a little bit about that, yeah? Klima, Alliance of the Klima has a partner in Choco in Colombia where there is a collective of people, and it's always talking about collectives. I think that's the most important issue that we have. Yeah, we only can act as collectives, and we have to think in acting as global collectives as well. Yeah, because maybe Kerstin can tell us a little bit more about the rights of the river Altaro. Yeah, that the local population fighted for giving constitutional rights to the river, and that changed absolutely the situation of exploration of the river. Kerstin?
Yeah, they established a so-called group of guardians of the river, and this also started because there was a huge threat being posed to the river by the massive use of pesticides, and the river was being polluted enormously. And of course, this affected food sovereignty in the region. And so they set up this group of people keeping, taking care actually of the river. And they together issued a veto and a prohibition of the use of, what's it called? The Monsanto pesticide. I can't. Glyphosate for the area. And this was essential to them because, of course, also their agriculture and their food sovereignty depends on the sanity of the river, on the healthiness of the river, and it's not being polluted. So and they continue patrolling the river. And also, I mean, Joao, maybe you can tell about I don't know how much you are involved in these programs, right? But in Rio Negro, we also have AIMAs, who are actually protectors of the environment, who study the environment, and by studying it and learning more about it, contribute to its protection and and its maintenance also.
I find this just one sentence extraordinarily interesting, what you're saying, but also what Joao is doing versus what I'm doing, because these indigenous people are before agriculture, right? Okay,
no. They are using agriculture. They are, as Joao pointed out, they are using agriculture to diversify the setup of species.
But it's a different type of agriculture. I think Edgar's talking about.
Maybe I can. I don't know, Joao, if you have a good picture, but I have one here so that I can show you a typical crop, what a crop looks like in the Rio Negro region, so that you can understand maybe the difference or the different approach between what agriculture can be actually, and it's not necessarily monocultural approach that we use a lot here in our traditional agriculture, that even though we use Dreifelderwirtschaft and all that stuff, we have actually no diversity on our crops. But I'm going to share the picture now. So, sorry. Can you see this picture?
Yeah.
So this is Donna Docilla on her crop, and this is literally her crop, okay? So all these fallen down and burnt down trees, they continue on her crop, and she's having all of her chili plants there, and you can see a banana plant, and it is surrounded by the forest. And this is where she plants her species, where she plants her cassava and.
So that's beautiful because they blend in, they're part of. This is different from the agriculture in the Cerrado, you know, or here in Italy, where it's like big corporations taking over and little businesses are going, or little farmer businesses are going out of business. You know, this is, you can compare that. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
Look, this was
like, we'd be lucky people.
Yeah, so this is her crop actually, yeah. And there you can see how they start the crop. And there is also a very, I mean, I think Shaw can explain it way better than I can. But it's a very sophisticated structure of this crop, because they know which plants can go together and in which shape they will plant them. And this is just the starting crop where they started. I don't know, maybe. The manivas are probably a year old or so, Schwa? Do you know? Or maybe some months.
Yeah, looks like they left like a few, but they probably replanted them. Like,
they are starting to replant it, right? So and this is yeah. It's already more grown, this crop, but you can also see that it's very different species next to each other, and they are all incorporated in the forest.
Yeah. Yeah, and just wanting to say as well that you're saying about the different types of agriculture, and this agriculture that they practice there is like for subsistence. So like each family, usually like the father and the mother, they manage the agricultural plots. And so like almost all the indigenous, they are farmers because they do this for them to eat. Otherwise, they're not going to have food for them to eat. So it's a different way of doing agriculture in this sense. And also that for doing agriculture in the Amazon, you have like to open a space in the Amazon forest. And I have seen this, that usually it's like the father and the mother, that they have to like cut down the forest with an axe. Like still nowadays, like they use an axe to cut down the forest. So like it's a really huge work that they do for being able to like produce the land. That is completely different from like all the type of agriculture as in the Cerrado and also in Europe. And the way of doing this agriculture, like as you mentioned, like in the history, for example, the Greek Empire, Asian Empire, for them to feed the whole empire, they like create a huge impact still back then in the environment, also in the rivers. Also like the Roman Empire, I've lived in Spain, and they say that in the past, there's like the myth that they say that a squirrel could cross the whole Spain from like cross the whole country on the top of the trees without touching the ground. I was living in the Andalusia where there's like big deserts there, and they say that like different people saying that in the past there was a forest there, and because of the Roman Empire, Roman influence, they like devastated everything. And still nowadays, like we are doing the same type of agriculture, but with like modern techniques, with like pesticides and so we're kind of repeating the same thing still nowadays in the same way, but with different tools, let's say, you know. So there's like a bit of the difference of like the scale of agriculture. And there's one that's like for subsistence. It's not like for them to sell their products, to get rich and to travel to Bahamas, you know? It's like just for them to be able to eat and feed their families. And so the scale of this is like a drop in the middle of the ocean. And this also helps, as Kirsten showed the photos, helps the diversify the landscape, create habitats for new species. So that, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think what you say, João, is exactly completing what Edgar said as well, yeah, because that's subsistential agriculture for subsistence, yeah, which is not the professional agricultural system of agricultural societies, yeah, and it has to do with a nomadic way of living as well, yeah, because you go from one place to the other to cultivate always a little piece of land, to create a new one, leave the other one to regenerate, yeah. But I wanted to ask Angelica, who is there with her hands up since a long while, to take the word, please. Micro.
No problem, yes. One point to Edgar, if I understand correctly, you said there is no dedication or no zoning for nature. There's for agriculture, for streets and that, but national park. In national parks, there are also area without human being, without.
But national parks in Italy and in Austria are also managed. There's always somebody who takes care of it.
But there are different areas, and there are areas which are only for the nature. There are parts for the visitors, but there are also areas only for nature. But it isn't. So sorry, it's okay. But that's yes.
Listen, you know, there was this saying in Japan when the nuclear power plant blew up. Okay.
Yes.
And the saying was, what do you do in case of a nuclear accident? Don't trust your government. That was the answer. And I don't trust the government. You know what I mean?
Ja. Ich glaube, es gibt eben sehr viele interessante Ansätze. Also den einen, den ich auch sehr interessant finde, wo er am Schluss halt das Bild gezeigt hat, dass man sagt, dieses Gebiet, das vom Menschen nicht betreten werden kann, in einem Barockgarten oder was das halt war, was er gezeigt hat. Ich finde es eine sehr interessante Methode, darauf aufmerksam zu machen. Und ich finde es extrem wichtig auch, dass die Natur wieder mehr Raum, mehr Platz, sozusagen mehr Rechte kriegt. Ja. Aber ich glaube, es gibt differenzierte Wege, also verschiedene Wege, um der Natur wieder mehr Spielraum zu geben, sozusagen. Und also zum Beispiel gerade dieser Ansatz mit Pestiziden, mit so weiter und so fort. Also wenn ich gerade schaue, dass ich mehr biologische Landwirtschaft habe, sicher auch Plätze, wo nur die Natur ist, aber ich würde es einfach nicht so schwarz-weiß sehen, sondern differenzierte Ansätze. Und ich glaube, es gibt eben Bereiche wie Biolandwirtschaft oder dass ich schaue in der Landwirtschaft, sicher, wenn ich diese Inseln habe, wo die Tiere dann nicht mehr zu dem einen zum anderen Platz kommen, weil dazwischen Agrarfläche ist, dann hilft das nicht viel. Aber ich kann zum Beispiel auch schauen, dass ich Verbindungen von Naturelementen habe. Also ich kenne da verschiedene Ansätze und ich glaube, es hat das und das Recht da zu sein, wobei das grundsätzlich die Natur ein größeres Sprachrohr hat. Ja, dem stimme ich schon zu. Aber ich tue mir immer schwer, alles nur so schwarz und weiß zu sehen, aber als Provokation oder als Mittel aufmerksam zu machen, finde ich es interessant. Und, ja.
No, listen, I'm an artist. I'm into radical solutions. You know, that's what my job is. And it's clear that I don't know why you're scared of it. It's perfectly fine. You know, I mean, it's not going to take over the world. There's a university in Slovakia that is only focusing in all its research on how important those last zones we have in Europe that are wild, mainly in Albania and so on, you know, in this part of the world, how important they are for the entire biodiversity. And that's why I cannot create a pristine rainforest of course. But if we have chunks and patches of land where nothing's happening, absolutely nothing, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to serve humans. It only serves nature itself.
Yes.
It can't hurt.
No, it's fine. I think that there is this part, but I think there are different ways that are important.
Sure.
I think that's the interesting thing, yeah, because the artist way is a radical way. The artistic way is something to put things to be understood, to be shown, to bring them to conscious to people, yeah. And we need these artistic approaches, yeah, to show the urgency of to act, yeah. And on the other hand, we see how important human interaction is, yeah. That's why we brought together the two issues, yeah, to help us to how to organize our thinking here as well, yeah. How can we improve, yeah, we as people working in public sector as well, yeah, how can we improve our society with concepts between indigenous land care and ADGA's human-free zones, yeah? How can we create spaces that serve nature in our environment? I think that's the main issue that we have, yeah? And how can we find ways in between, yeah, to act, yeah, each one of us? And I think what for me was so important to hear in both ways is the collective way, is the networking idea, is to join each other, to help each other, yeah? Seed collecting. We have Aachen in Austria, which is a seed collector, yeah? We have different seed banks, yeah, which are very important for biodiversity, yeah? And people working together, joining together forces to create spaces for nature. I think that's one of the learnings that we can take with us, yeah?
Thank you. I want to give you an example about all my farmer friends around here. This is a poor part of Italy. Okay, and there's a problem with the pasta in Italy because most of the wheat that is being used to make pasta comes from Brazil and from the United States. What is happening to my farmers here? Yeah. My farmers here have the hardest time. They plant crops that are very old species. Nobody almost wants them. In this part of Italy, they harvest 3 times a year because it's rather warm here also in winter. But what does this mean? Tons of water is being used. There's almost no water here anymore. But it's their only means to survive. You know, like my direct farmers, they're lovable people. And they have a vineyard. What do you think how much money they get for 1 kilogram of grapes at the end of autumn? 3 cents. All that work for 3 cents is ridiculous. How can they survive? So it's again, you know, it's these big corporations who are taking over and over and over. It's the international trade. And I'm totally with Jesus, who first pointed out as a counterpoint, you know, the cultural landscape is very important what these farmers are doing. They're keeping the landscape in a way. But if they are not doing this anymore, and of course their children don't want to continue, in no time, our whole province here surrounding Rome will not have farming anymore. Because the people are getting old, they're dying, and the young ones all moved to the city. Already now we have villages that are emptied out. There's nobody anymore. It's ghost towns. And what these people are doing, you know, I give you another example. If you go inland from here, you come to the lakes. These lakes used to be surrounded when I got here first time 20 years ago by marron trees. Some of them 400 or 500 years old, so much older than human beings. they create a perfect environment for all kinds of species that live on the ground below them. And then Mr. Ferrero came, the one who creates the Nutella, this, and said, oh, this is, these trees, they're not doing much for us. We're tired of buying all the hazelnuts in Turkey. From now on, we grow them here because the climate is perfect. And they cut down all these trees that have been around for 400 or 500 years without mercy. And by doing so, also the farmers who used to live on that kind of, crops, marrons, they don't exist anymore. In the midst of Europe, it's crazy. So that, and in this case, I'm all with Kerstin, or I'm also all with Angelica, because it's very important to send out, and also with Silvia, of course, an extreme message to a certain point. We're not threatening anybody. We're just saying, okay, we need these kind of zones, because then people start to think it enrolls a process inside of them. When I'm in Naples, for example, and I'm talking to the Napolitani at the Cartiere Intelligente, a beautiful institution that tries to bring the arts together with nature. And so, and slowly, I'm having a meeting next week with Amy Schlein. Amy Schlein is now the very young new boss of the Social Democrats here in Italy. And this lady has put green issues on top of her agenda. That's quite amazing for Social Democrats, right? So because she's interested in Go Bucks Go. So this Go Bucks Go is slowly infiltrating, very slowly, much too slow, politicians. And that's very, very important, because as many ecologists who are working with me have pointed out, as an artist, I speak to a different audience. It's not the classic environmentalists. All you people are fantastic. You're beautiful in whatever you are doing for the world and for nature. But the artistic take is a bit of a different take. And you should never forget, you might not be aware of it, that the arts are not just a pillar or a column of the capitalist system. We are the spearhead.
That's a wonderful world, because we are coming to an end. Thank you very much, Edgar. Maybe we ask Jean to make a final statement, and then I would like to ask everybody here from the present people to give a final statement as well, what we can take home from today.
Well, thank you, Edgar. Yeah, I think also as the men have the power to destroy, also the men have the power to recover and diversify and rebuild things. So I think it's something that an example of the indigenous here, what they are doing. So they use the power and the energy to create diversity, manage the landscape, and survive, basically, and help to protect the land. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Maybe to pass the word to somebody else, Jean. We pass the ball to somebody.
Let's say Mario.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, both of you, and also, Silvia, for your great presentations and moderation. And I think both initiatives, Go Bucks Go is a very great initiative, especially this community approach, and which is also important in the concept of indigenous agriculture, as you told us. And I think, yes, I think it would be good also to have here in Europe a combination of these non-human zones and also small-scale organic farming. So because land also feeds people, and it should feed them regionally. So yes, I thank you. It was very interesting for me. And okay, and I pass the word to Kerstin.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I can only repeat what you were saying, Marion. I think it's very important that we have different approaches to this very complex topic. And it was very, beautiful to see how everywhere around the world people engage to maintain biodiversity. And I also thank you very much for this interesting Maloca Mundial. And it was very great, and having all of you participating also actively in the discussion. That was also very nice. And I pass the word to Jana.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much also from my side. It was really interesting to listen to your presentations and get more insights. I think one point that I will take with me from today was that Edgar made me remember or remind how powerful art can be. And that's something that is really important. And maybe sometimes we stop thinking about how really influential art can be also in politics. But thank you very much for your campaign, and I wish you all the best.
And Jana, please nominate somebody to talk.
Yeah. Andreas, please.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I was a bit late, so I missed the first contribution, but was very interested in the work of Edgar. So thank you for that presentation. I myself, I'm interested in this topic because I'm responsible for the sustainability at Swarovski Optik. And biodiversity is very central to our sustainability strategy. So we also involved ourselves very directly in conserving land for the sake of biodiversity, by buying land in Costa Rica to contribute to building a biological corridor between two national parks. So through that, I'm now directly immersed in this topic as well, because we decided we want to take this route directly to learn, to involve ourselves, and to also speak about it. And that's why I enjoyed, coming in, although I was late, to this round today, to see that there's so many people thinking about this topic, and to also hear that there's so many different approaches of how to do this. And so I find that very valuable. And thank you very much for the Klimabündnis to organize this very last minute jumped onto this opportunity. And I'll post a little a link in the chat, so you see our project as well. If you're interested, you can check it out. Thank you. And I'll pass over to, let me see, Elke.
Dear Andreas, I'm very sorry I was late too, but I had to jump in to get my daughter from kindergarten, which was a bit unexpected. So I just came in half an hour ago, something. But what I got from this discussion was that Edgar, the methods or the approach you presented was not like, I just jumped in the discussion when Angelika talked, and it was a bit not, she said not black, not white, it is, I thought the methods are maybe sometimes a bit harder to understand for people. And it reminded me of the discussion of the Klimakleber we have in Austria or Germany now at the moment. So people fighting for a thing which we all agree on is really necessary and very important. And sometimes the methods have to be a bit, out of the box thinking, and therefore are also legitimated. Yeah. And yeah, I'm not sure. I hope I met a bit the point now, and I hope I didn't. That's just my contribution I can make out of the last few minutes. But I will be happy if Silvia maybe can feed me in or give me the presentation afterwards, and so I get the whole of the discussion, the whole presentations today.
We are recording it, Elke.
You're recording it, so perfect. I can listen to it then. Yeah. Okay, so thanks a lot, and I pass on to Jesus.
Thank you very much, Elke. And thank you to Klimabündnis for the organization of this meeting. It has been really very interesting. The topics that we have discussed are very actual, very topical issues. And I think the approach combining the perspective from, let me say, indigenous communities in Brazil with a perspective from Europe is really extremely original. What I would encourage Klimabündnis is to continue with this approach. Maybe you can consider after some time to organize again such a meeting, but trying to ensure that also representatives from the economic sector will attend it. Because, you know, environmental policies must base upon a participatory approach. And I believe that Edgar's perspective is very valuable and should be taken into account, but without taking into account simultaneously economic interest, this will not work. So that is why in regarding maybe a possible future meeting again, I would encourage trying to ensure that also representatives from the agriculture sector and from the forestry sector, for example, attend such a teleconference, and they can also contribute with their points of view. And thank you for the meeting. I have enjoyed. It was really very interesting. Thank you very much. And I give the floor to
Thank you. I make it short. Thank you very much for the fine presentations, moderation, and engagements.
Und den Ball weitergeben. Die Susanne hat es nicht.
Susanne, bitte, ja.
Okay, thank you, Silvia, for having me invited. I mean, I think every thought and every contribution of saving our staying at this planet is very precious, and there were a lot of interesting inputs, and thank you all very much. Thank you for the presentation. And I also, I would say, I mean, human beings are not more worth than animals, and so I agree with Edgar in this. Okay, and thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody. I enjoyed it very much as well, and for me it was very interesting to hear the discussion here also about the different points of view. What came out for me was also very strongly that we have to pressure the politics, yeah, as collectives acting to bring politics to work for nature and for us, yeah, and that's one of the messages I take with me, and thank you so much, Jesus, as well. Yeah, I think we will have to organize meetings with agriculture, economics, and forestry people, and I think it's great that Swarovski already is doing this great initiative, yeah, which you should present to us. Maybe we talk next time, yeah. So we organize something, because I think that we should share it. I think our work is to share good initiatives, yeah, so that we know who is doing what and that we can help each other, yeah. And yeah, for me, I thank you very much for participating, for your inputs. It was very interesting. And I hope that we meet each other soon. Yeah. And it's 5 o'clock and we are really on the minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you and have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.